Suffice to bear in mind that an important argument for Brexit was precisely the so-called refugee threat. The Brexit referendum was the ultimate proof that ideology, in the good old Marxist sense of false consciousness, is well and alive in our societies. The case of Brexit exemplifies perfectly the falsity of the calls to restore national sovereignty, like the British people themselves, not some anonymous Brussels bureaucrats, should decide the fate of our country. Immediately after the Brexit victory, here is what my good friend Eric Sentner wrote me from Chicago a couple of days ago now, a quote. At the heart of the Brexit is a paradox worth articulating. England wants to withdraw from the bureaucratic administrative control of Brussels, control seen as compromising its sovereignty, in order to be better able to organize the dismantling of its sovereignty by way of more radical submission to the logic of global capital, to organize this dismantling on its own. Does this not have the markings of the death drive? The organism wants to die in its own way, on its own terms. This is the paradox at the heart also of American Republican thinking. We want to, I noticed that I almost got an applause for death drive. There is still hope for Hegelian negativity. Now still, Eric Sentner goes on, this paradox is at the heart of American Republican thinking. We want to take back our country in order to be better able to submit it and pretty much all of life to the logic of the market, end of quote. And this paradox, I think, is confirmed by a quick look at the conflict between the UK and the European Union in the past decades. You know, when some leftists dream about how, if we restore the full sovereignty of the United Kingdom, we will be able to restore some welfare state and so on and so on. My God, just look. You can locate them easy on the web. Look at the predominant, all the big conflicts between the UK government and Brussels. It was not UK government defending workers' rights against Brussels as the instrument of international capital. I remember one big conflict in the Tony Blair years was that the EU demanded limiting the weekly work hours, and United Kingdom government complained that such a measure will affect the competitiveness of the British industry. Then there was ecology. The Brussels bureaucracy wanted to impose higher ecologic standards, like prohibiting buying oil produced through fracking and so on. Again, United Kingdom sabotaged it. It was the same with the topic of human rights and so on and so on. In short, the so much vilified Brussels bureaucracy was also a protector of minimal workers' rights in exactly the same way as it is today the protector of the rights of refugees against many sovereign nation states which are not ready to receive them. The ongoing troubles with immigrants in Germany simply confront us with the limits of democracy, the way we have it now. How are we to counter anti-immigrant populists who demand a referendum on immigrants, assured that the majority of Germans will vote against the immigrants? Is then the solution to give the voting rights also to immigrants? But to whom among them? To those who are already in Germany, to those who want to go there. At the end of this line, we get the idea of worldwide elections, which is self-defeating for a simple and precise reason. I quote here Yuval Harari from his new book, Homo Deus. Quote, people feel bound by democratic elections only when they share a basic bond with most other voters. If the experience of other voters is alien to me, and if I believe they don't understand my feelings and don't care about my vital interests, then even if I am outvoted by 100 to 1, I have absolutely no reason to accept the verdict. Democratic elections work only within populations that have some prior common bind, such as shared religious beliefs or national myths. They are a method to settle disagreements between people who already agree on the basics. End of quote. In larger contexts, the only procedure at our disposal outside outright war, of course, are negotiations. That's why the Middle East conflict cannot be solved by elections, but only either by war or by negotiations. So where does this leave us with Brexit? When Stalin was asked, sorry, I repeat this story for probably like 40th time. When Stalin was asked in the late 20s, which deviation is worse, the right one or the leftist one, he snapped back. They are both worse. I think it was the same with the choice British voters were confronting. Reject Brexit, remain in the EU was in some sense worse, because since it meant persisting in the inertia that keeps Europe mired down. Exit was worse since it made changing nothing look desirable. In the days before the referendum, there was a pseudo-deep thought circulating in our media. Whatever the result, EU will never be the same. It will be irreparably damaged. I think it's the opposite, which is true. Nothing will really change. Just the inertia of Europe will be more and more impossible to ignore. Europe will again lose time in negotiations among the EU members, which will continue to make any large-scale political project impossible. This is what those who oppose Brexit didn't see. Shocked, they now complain about the irrationality of the Brexit voters, ignoring the desperate need for change that the vote made palpable. So again, I am well aware that the Brussels bureaucracy is inefficient and so on, whatever you want, corrupted, but the solution is not return to national sovereignty. Why? I like to recall always Mao Zedong's old motto, everything under heaven is in utter chaos, the situation is excellent. A crisis is to be taken seriously, without illusions, but also as a chance to be fully exploited. Although crises are painful and dangerous, they are the terrain on which battles have to be won. Is there not a struggle also in heaven? Is the heaven also not divided? And does the ongoing confusion not offer a unique chance to react to the need for a radical change in a more appropriate way, with a project that will break the vicious cycle of European technocracy, Brussels technocracy, and nationalist populism? The true division of our heaven is not between anemic Brussels bureaucracy and nationalist passions, but between the two together, their vicious cycle, and maybe a new European project which will address the true challenges that humanity is confronting today. This is maybe the only small hope given to us. In the same way that in the United States, the same rage and chaos which gave birth to Donald Trump also gave birth to Sanders. Let's hope that the present confusion will also open up the space for European Bernie Sanders. So, was this deadlock, the deadlock in which we are today after Brexit, where we see clear that both choices are worse? Just changing nothing, persisting in the Europe we have, or the nationalist way out? Was it not already staged, now I return to Wagner, in the very last scene of Wagner's Ring? What remains after the twilight of gods is the human crowd silently observing the cataclysmic event, a crowd which, in Patrice Chéreau and Pierre Boulez's path-breaking staging, is left staring into the spectators when the music ends. Here is Cherot's own description. Quote, "The redemption motive is a message delivered to the entire world. But like all Pythonesses, the orchestra is unclear and there are several ways of interpreting its message. Doesn't one hear it? Shouldn't one hear it with mistrust and anxiety? A mistrust which would match the boundless hope which this humanity nurses and which has always been at stake, silently and invisibly in the atrocious battles which have torn human beings apart throughout the ring. The gods have lived, the values of their world must be reconstructed and reinvented. Men are there as if on the edge of a cliff. They listen tensely to the oracle which rumbles from the depth of the earth." End of quote. We can imagine this nameless crowd as a figure of today's proletariat, a crowd of refugees, survivors of an ideological catastrophe or a civil war. Everything now rests on them without any guarantee in God or any other figure of the big other. This predicament, the ending of Wagner's Twilight of Gods, again, when humanity, but totally disoriented humanity, survive just staring into empty space, this devastating vision, this is our situation today, and maybe, just maybe, also our hope. Thank you very much.